where the two channels meet. So if you look up underneath, they may look completely rust-free.
Here we are, the Jeep Farm staff.
This episode of Working on the Jeep Farm is brought to you by Australia's Jeep Action magazine. Find full-size Jeep stories and more by subscribing at JeepTruck.com.
This is a Wagoneer. It's 52,000 original miles. It's a pewter gray blue plaid interior with a 401. The elderly couple, all they did was use it to go to the doctor and back, and I guess they had a pecan orchard and used it to cruise around that. That's the reason for the low mileage. The paint was faded, otherwise I'm a big fan of original paint, but we're gonna leave most of the original interior other than carpet, and as you can see, we're prepping it for paint. Got the wood grain off, fixed a few little dings, and sometimes I like to put lift kits on them because Wagoneers are sleds from the factory. Just depends on the vehicle. So I did a 4-inch lift on this with 31 1050-15s, and this originally had hubcaps, so I found the original, I found a set of Jeep slotted wheels. This is a low mileage 401 Jeep. You know, all I've done basically is hit it with a degreaser and a pressure washer. Obviously I blew some of the paint off the radiator, but that'll be painted. I might pull the motor and paint the engine block, but it runs so good I'm really not going to do much from there. You know, typical tune-up stuff, and I've already had the carburetor professionally rebuilt. You can still see it's got the original chalk marks on the firewall. There's a 765. I mean, this is pretty much as original as it gets. You know, you can see the Jeep logo on the cruise control unit. The previous owner had, and anybody that's a Jeep guy knows the Jeep ignition woes. This has the auto light system on it, which is even more problematic. So it has the original, and then it's got a backup. And the previous owner wired in a backup ignition for the times that it'll fail, and anybody that's had a Jeep with a Motorcraft or an auto light ignition knows that it will fail. I do tend to lean towards the 401 motors. If I find a good Wagoneer with the 360, I'm all over it, but I genuinely love the 401. Is just a neat option. I've had a bunch of 401 Jeeps, and I definitely find myself, I buy more 401s. Low mileage, you know, 52,000 miles. I'll go up to like 130,000 miles, but that's pretty much my breaking point on Wagoneers. Some Wagoneers, like the tawny orange one, we actually pulled the motor, regasketed it, painted the block the correct AMC metallic blue, and then reassemble with new hoses. I typically, I would say 90% of the Jeeps I do, I get rid of this ignition system and put an HEI distributor in it. That is one thing that I do steer away from stock, just because 401s like a lot of timing, and they also like the HEI ignition, and it gets rid of the problematic stock ignition boxes, and you should never have to mess with them again. But this being a factory 401 4-barrel motor, you know, I'll leave this paint alone, new under hood insulation, and I'll paint this kind of stuff, paint the block, paint the air cleaner, put the original 401 sticker back on the air cleaner that's missing, paint all this, and all the pieces and parts will be painted, so it'll pretty much look like it did when it came from the factory, albeit I will not paint the inner engine compartment. I think a little waxing on these panels will make it look good enough for a restoration that's a driver restoration. And also I really try and keep my vehicles priced within what I would pay for them. So I can't honestly sell a Wagoneer for like $29,000 or $30,000 unless it's just immaculate. So I price my vehicles to where a normal guy can buy them that's always wanted one. So when you do that, you have to make some compromises, which is not a complete nut and bolt restoration. I call them driver restorations. You know, a guy can go camping in it, go to the grocery store, haul his kids around, but yet go to the local car show and be proud enough to open his hood and show people what he's got, you know. And that's really my goal at the Jeep farm. I do some nut and bolt restorations, but I really try and keep it priced to where the average guy can buy it. You know, when you're looking at buying a Wagoneer, one of the things I really look for is rust-free. Wagoneers and JeepTrucks, they leak like a sieve. I mean, no matter how squishy and nice all your rubber weather stripping is, they do collect water. And I've never owned a full-size Jeep that didn't have water in the floorboards after a hard rainstorm. It's just because of the design of the doors. But one thing I wanted to show you, and you can see I've got the new carpet in here. And it's basically just in here, I lay it out like a week before to let the carpet soften after it's been folded up in a box. And one of the spots here, if I pull this carpet back and show you, so this is a factory drain plug right here. You can actually pop these out just like a CJ and let the floors drain. But this area right in here, and then this channel right here is really one of the areas that you really need to look the most when you're buying a full-size Jeep. If you're out there, just tell the seller of the Jeep, I want to pull this strip out. There's a detail strip that holds the carpet down right here. Remove the Phillips head screws and just pull the carpet back and look right here. Because if you look underneath and you say, well, I can look underneath, it's kind of it's 50% because there's the floor steel and then there's channels underneath, and where you get the rust is where the two channels meet. So if you look up underneath, it may look completely rust free, but there's a piece of steel that comes here and then the floor comes here, and there's a seam that runs right down here, and water sits in that seam, especially from the AC units, because you have a drain line under here and the drain line gets clogged and then the AC condensation runs down on the floor. So I would tell anybody that's looking to buy a full-size Jeep, look here, take your time, take the trim off, and if the trim doesn't come loose, then that means the screws are rusted to the floor, and that's usually not a great sign. But obviously this Jeep is as rust-free as they get, and that's really one of the main areas to look for when buying a full-size Jeep for rust, and rear quarters, but that's visualized from the outside. I'm just going to go over a few basics of the power window on a tailgate of an FSJ, which is forever an issue. Now this one I've stripped for paint, so if you ever lose your key, you can remove the top of the thing and basically just stick a screwdriver in there, and then boom, the window comes down. So don't tell thieves that, or else they can break in very easily. So, you know, on your tailgate, you've got basically a switch right here, and that tells the motor when the tailgate's closed that the glass can go up and down. So if you got to get to your motor, you basically trigger the switch and then take your handy little Phillips head screwdriver and then open it up like that. Just get out of the way of my welder here. So I'm running out of room here, but basically a couple of things I look for. One of the biggest issues with motors not working correctly are your grounds. Now this ground and whatnot is tied into the trim of the Jeep, and all these zip ties, this is awesome factory stuff. And what I do, this one's really slow going up, so basically what you want to do is you could either slide the glass out all the way. I use a little step ladder and just let it hold the glass up. And you can disassemble the motor, clean it, clean all its contact points, but really most of the time if you just use a good grease and you grease this, you grease the slides, you grease the motor, and then double check your ground wires, you will exponentially increase the rate at which the window motor will go up and down. You know, and this one's a prime example because I haven't gotten there yet, but you can, let me put my key back in here. This, so trigger here, and you can lower that, you know, and close your gate. And then this is typical of any full-size Jeep. You see how slow it goes up, which is going up. you know, because all this will be replaced before it's sold. But just by grease and ground, you can speed that window up and down. And you know, the full-size Jeeps also have a switch on the dashboard, which is very hard to find, but a bypass can be wired in there to work if the switch does break. Anyway, so gonna repaint it, the original pewter gray, wood grain, new carpet, new headliner. Other than that, the door panels and the blue plaid seats are absolutely perfect, so we're gonna keep that. I really enjoy keeping as much originality as I can. A lot of the Jeeps I do, I like to keep original paint, but this was just far too baked off to do so. But all the rubber, the trim, the grille, the bumpers, all that is absolutely perfect. So that's what we're gonna do with it. Paint it and finish putting the interior up, and then it goes for sale.
Roll B, scene B2, take one, Mark.